Welcome everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi. This is Loimata. This is my baby girl. So if you guys can see her video, her family name is actually Kiana Leafi. So anytime you see her, you can always call her Bini or Kiana Leafi. Either of them works. But I want to welcome everybody to our session today. This is, what's the session called? Session is called, hold on, let me pull up my presentation. Iloa le Pasifika, Lana too. So we're going to be talking a lot about Pacific frameworks and how they inform, how our histories have informed who we are, and what that can look like for moving into the future. So, before I do that, I thought I kicked myself out of the room. Before I do that, let me share my screen. All right. So I can't see anybody right now. So, and this is my first time presenting on Zoom. So excuse me as I kind of move through these hiccups. I tried to familiarize myself with it early on. Wasn't so great at it, and that's okay. Every day is an opportunity to learn. So thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to make some acknowledgements. So proud of you, Kiana. So I know that people are joining us from all different parts of, the world. I'm sure the whole globe is represented in this room right now. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to take a moment for us to bring to the forefront of wherever we're at, wherever we're occupying right now, and bring into the forefront the First Nations people of the land that we occupy. I think a lot of times when we want to talk about Indigenous knowledge, we neglect to acknowledge lands that we may occupy that we're not Indigenous to ourselves. So for yourselves, you don't have to share that aloud, but I want you to think about who are the First Nations people of the land that you're on. And if you don't know, that's quite all right, because there's reasons why we don't know these things, right? It's not by happenstance that we have no idea who the First Nations people are on some of the lands. In fact, for the lands that I occupy, I had to go and do my own research. And so as I occupy the land here, I want to first acknowledge the First Nations people of these lands, who are the Steilacoom people and the Puget Sound Salish folks. What's interesting about the land that I occupy is that I live in a city that's actually called Steilacoom, and it's named after the native tribes that occupied this land, but there are 0 Steilacoom people left. And that is not by accident, but by the colonial nature of colonization. So I want to make that acknowledgement. I also want to acknowledge that this session altogether is a part of a month-long series of talks and lectures and activities that a Pacific Islander collective here in Washington State put together so that we could make sure that the Pacific Islander narrative is represented when we talk about API Heritage Month. So if you've got to join us in any of the previous conversations, thank you. We appreciate having you here. And if this is your first session, yo, you in for a ride. And if you don't know me, hey, just go with the flow. I'm a whole lot of energy. So what's really important about us having these sorts of spaces is that there's so many different types of conversations that the Pacific has and so many knowledge bases that we have, but very few of them are acknowledged when we have these heritage months, right? Oftentimes we're asked to dance, we're asked to hula, but we're not asked to have these very difficult conversations like, where is our culture going? Why is all that is relative to you all are dancing? Why are we always positioned as entertainment? And so each of the sessions throughout this month intend to really platform real parts of our conversation. It's like one of my homegirls said, y'all like Mexican food on Cinco de Mayo, but you don't like Mexican people. Mm-hmm. So we enter into this conversation with the same energy, and that if people want to love us and love our culture, they must love all parts of us. So there's my acknowledgements. I also want to acknowledge the lands that I am Indigenous to. My name is Kiana Fuega, if I haven't had the great opportunity to meet you yet. My family is from America Samoa, or Eastern Samoa, as I like to call it, by way of Leone and Tutuila, and in Olosanga in Manuatele. So your girl from the kingdom of Manua and also from Leone, that's where my ancestry has always been before my generation. So I want to acknowledge that. Let's move forward. Okay. So usually when you go into any lectures or any conversations or talanoa, people will share with you what the housekeeping rules are. And I don't like that. I'm like, no, keep your own house. No, I don't like no housekeeping rules, or, we'll have community guidelines, and that's great and everything. But when we talk about Pacific knowledge, in as many times as possible throughout this talk, I'm gonna always bring it back to what knowledge bases I'm raised from. So instead of calling these community guidelines, it's not even gonna be about no rules, it's gonna be conditions, because rules sound very colonial. So these are conditions of the Fale Talimalo. Pretty dope, right? So the Fale Talimalo, do we have any Samoans who want to chime in really quickly and explain what a Fale Talimalo is so I can feel more interactive?
In my understanding, Fale Talimalo is a guest house.
You're right, Kiana. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to my co-host, Kiana. So Fale Talimalo in Samoan language is a Samoan guest house. And so as we share knowledge, some of us are stewards of this knowledge, custodians of this knowledge, and some of us, these are not knowledges that belong to us, so we're guests in this house. So these are the conditions of this Fale Talimalo that we're sharing. As you'll see in the picture, that's a small Fale Talimalo. That's Epi's daughter, my nieces, and my nephew and my daughter when we were in Samoa last year. Suinga Ula Beach in Utuleya, if you ever want to go there. So conditions of the Fale Talimalo, as we have conversations, please challenge yourself to remain engaged, okay? So what I mean is that there's gonna be a lot of times where, I ask questions and you're gonna be too shy, you don't wanna take yourself off of mute, you don't wanna share your perspectives. I'm gonna ask you to challenge yourself to engage. Challenge yourself to share. This space is nothing if not imbued by your knowledge, right? So challenge yourself to remain engaged in that way. There's gonna be other people where I'm gonna be speaking from perspectives that are not their own, and that's okay. So, you might be totally unrelated to you, still challenge yourself to remain engaged. And then finally, there might be parts of these conversations that make you feel uncomfortable, especially when we talk about systems of power. Please understand that when I talk about systems of power and when I talk about things like colonialism, the intent is to not indict any one person, but to indict the systems of power that we exist in, right? So if they feel uncomfortable for you, do what you need to do, care for yourself, but also I want you to sit with that discomfort and challenge yourself to remain engaged. I guess we're all doing it right now. Yeah, keep that mic on mute, okay? If you're not talking, so that we don't have to hear, in the background, as I've been in some other Zoom conversations, might be people like singing in the background on some karaoke. Yeah, man, you know what? Mute your mic if you're not sharing conversation, so it's not picking up the echo and everybody else, and we don't hear your mom yelling at you. Yeah, mute your mic. Oh, I don't have the chat box feature. What? Okay, well, I don't have the chat box feature on mine because I'm sharing my screen, but on the bottom of your screens, you should see, whether you're on a phone or whether you're on your laptop, you should see that there's an option for chat. So please make use of that chat box. I have moderators in the room, so they're here to help let me know if there's any questions that are in the chat box. They'll let me know, but use it as a place to reflect. So there might be things where you want to just make comments on something that I might have shared or something that you relate to. Please make use of it. If you've been in these talks with me, I'll be writing whole dissertations in the chat box, okay? And for nobody but myself, but it's just important for me to be able to extrapolate the ideas that I have, put it somewhere, and then if it resonates with somebody, then holla at me. But most people was like, dang, she got a whole lot to say. So make use of the chat box. Also make use of these, the reactions. If you don't have much to say, but you just want to give me some emojis, you can clap for me. You can give me a thumbs up. Thank you, Effie. I see your thumbs up. And then finally, I'm not even going to, we don't need to, like, I don't need to write all of the conditions of this Valiteli Malo. I think naturally when we talk about Pacific knowledge, these things we already know, right? So I wanted to highlight a teaching model that I'd come across by some of our Pacific scholars, Manatu, Violetti, Mahina, and Seve Williams. And so somebody had pulled together a model that they offered to teachers for training and teaching them how to use Salanoa. And I think that some of the things that they highlighted in that model are also important for us to adapt and make sure that we're keeping in this space too. So these are things that as Pacific people, we're very familiar with, but we don't always highlight as things that are ownership to the ways that we communicate when we come into like shared spaces or when we come into other meetings. So I want to platform that. The things that they highlighted was Ofa, Alofa, Aloha, Aroha, which is love, Ma'afana, which is warmth. So, you know, it's not a cold place. Coronavirus got you out there, you know, all isolated and stuff. It's okay. We can stay connected. We can be warm together, you know, just virtually. Malia, humor. So you may have been in other talks. People might not joke as much. I use humor as a way to kind of deflect a lot of the heavy conversations we have. So your girl gonna pop some humor a lot, and we just gonna have to deal with it because it's a condition of the talimalo. Boom. And then whakapaapa or fa'aloalo, which is respect. So just making sure that we maintain respect when we're in these spaces. We all have different vantage points that we come from. And so respect that. I want to give a moment in case there's anything that I may have forgotten for folks to either share that by unmuting yourself or adding that into the chat box. The moment starts now, y'all. Anything that we need to add? Kyungo will tell me yes or no because I can't see the chat box.
I think we're good, sis.
All right. Okay, so moving forward. Oh, wrong button. Okay, so let me, how do I do this if I want to share a different screen? This is Wa Mai Oi. How are you doing? Don't answer just yet. Don't answer in the chat box. I actually have an exercise for us to do. So if you would indulge me in the technology that we have in today's day and age. Not that one, Auntie, a different one.
Kiana, if you end your screen share and then you can click share screen, it'll allow you to select a different item.
Oh, thanks, Aki. Okay, screen share. Share. Okay. It's the wrong page, Auntie. It's not this one. Maybe it's not gonna let me use it. Can you all see this? Where it says, it should say menti.com. We all looking at the same thing?
Yes.
Yes.
I see. All right. So if you have a device or if you can open up another browser, if you could go to menti.com and type in the code 770703 and answer me in one word or two words. Up to you. Tell me how you're doing. I want to see how we as a collective are doing. Since if I ask everybody to unmute all at once, it's going to take a long time. Let's just look together how we all are doing. I'm going to do it myself too. So, you know, don't be shy, guys. Delay for time. Use more what? Come through Marshallese language. I don't know what that means, but I know that's Marshallese. Gucci. Amazing. Okay, can I say how amazing you guys are? I appreciate that you all are already using non-English terms. Okay, come through, amazing group. Even Gucci. True. That's not standard American English. A lot of money we have ties. All right. Okay, so we have Saipe. So you feeling okay? Believe me, I know Tongan too. But yeah. Almost done with work. Come through, almost done with work. I'm not. I still got more work to do after this. Happy when I hear you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mom, is that you out there? with my puppies. Wana Navu. I think that's Fiji. Oh, somebody's sick. All right. Well, if you're sick, I'm sending you a lot of like love and healing. I hope that you get better. Immaculate. Shh, don't worry, that's my speaker. Tapwaki. Hella bomb. You're from the night. You grew up in the 90s, huh? I said bomb to somebody and they're like, yeah, auntie, we don't say that anymore. And I was like, oh, watch your mouth, okay. Blessa, mafana, saipe. All right. Okay. Thank you for indulging me. So we can see right here, this is how everybody's doing. Because I don't want you to just tell me how you're doing. Yo, tell everybody how you're doing. So thank you for indulging me on that. I hope that, come through if you still need to come through. But I hope that, in this space that we share, my intention is to share the knowledge that I know, right? But I also understand, as you saw in that Falitali Malo, how there's very many different entry points that everybody is entering into this conversation from their own experiences. And, sometimes happy, sick, busy, need coffee, lele fafitai, wherever you're at on that spectrum. I hope that, you take what you need out of this space. Okay, so now we know how each other are. Good, that's great. I wanted to like ask where everybody was coming from, but I thought that I would be able to see the chat box, and I can't. So can everybody type where they're coming from in the chat box so that we know where the chat box is, and we know that when I say please use the chat box, that we know where it's located and we can use it. Can everybody put in there where you guys are joining us from, and then Kyunga or Ness are gonna read that to me so I can hear where everybody is at.
We got Fairway, Washington, Waimanalo, Hawaii, White Center, San Bruno, Cali, Whidbey Island, Illinois, San Francisco Airport, Tequila, San Diego, Chico, California, Beacon Hill, Riverside, California, Lakewood. We got Arkansas. We got Arkansas in the house, Orange County, West Seattle.
Okay.
Clover.
Wow. Man, I feel so global. That's great. Thank you for sharing with the thank you for sharing with me. I'm in, schmegular, degular Washington. So let's get started. Let's keep moving through this conversation. So the title of this workshop is Iloa le Pasifika, Lana, and it's actually pulled from a Samoan adage, Iloa le Samoa, Lana, olon savali, malana tautala. So what that means is that for Samoans, it means that Samoans are revealed by the ways that they carry themselves, the ways that they speak, and the ways that they walk, right? And so it places the focus on the culture and the values that we come from, and how our identities are so much more than just, blood quantum, but they also are informed by the cultures that we're steeped in. And so I found these pictures last night. I mean, I didn't find them, but they came to mind at the same time, and I didn't realize, like, yo, we're all wearing the same clothes, guys. Let me put this all in a row. This is great. Oh, we all wore the same uniform. But these are some really significant photos to me, and I think that they really inform why this as a topic is important to me. So let me explain. So to the far left, you see a photo of, these are the Matai of the village of Leone. The chap over here in the blue ear, second from the left, is my grandfather, the late Ilawa Tusipasi Almavai. And actually to the left of him is the late Congressman Eni Faleo of Mavaenga, who is a family member of ours as well. So this was at one of the flag days before my time, because my pictures was all the way in color when I was born. Yeah, they had sepia back in that day. So this is a photo from back then. And this is one of the last times that in Leone, all of those titles from, Ilawa, Venga, Leo, Leoso, all of those titles were all full. Tuitele, all of them are full. I don't know that since this time in the 80s that any of those titles have all been consecutively filled at the same time. But so a memorable photo for that reason. Next to that photo is another chap in his red ear. This is my father, the late Meali'i Fuega. So what's significant about this photo is that it was taken on Christmas, and I think it was the second Christmas ever in Washington in like 25 years that it had snowed. And so my dad, being the Olosenga person that he is, was like, oh, I'm gonna do a photo shoot. So he went outside to go and take a photo out there. And this photo is really important to me because this was my dad's last Christmas with us. And he ended up passing away a few months after that to cancer. And so, of course, being the children that we are, so the picture to the right, the far right, is of me and my nerd squad. So this is me, my daughter, and my niece and my nephew, just trying to recreate the photo of my dad when we were hit with the snowstorm the following year. And so when I put all of these photos side to side, I put the ones to the one of my dad and us side to side, but I didn't add to it this photo of my grandfather. And so when I put this side to side, I look at that and I'm like, whoa, like, like there's such a consistency, right? Like there's so much that these three photos say to me. But when I think about this adage of, Iloa le Samoa, I think about how important it is for me as a Samoan woman, to make sure that the knowledge that was passed to me from the guy to my left, and then the men to the far left of us, that the knowledge that they have and that they've imbued onto me, that I'm able to pass it down to the young girl that's to my right, which is my daughter. And that it sounds really pretty when we think about it, but there's real challenges as people who live in the diaspora for us to be able to do that and make sure that those things are effectively passed down. And so when I think about Tu and Tautala and Savali, I think about this photo. I also recognize that there's no women in this photo. That was not, that was on accident. Like, if you were from my family, women run my family. So that I did not intentionally not have, any other women in there. All gangsters in my family. Epi will tell you that. Epi and Fanga can tell you that. But these are just photos that came to mind when I think about the responsibility that I have as a buffer in this 4 generations of photo, for me to pass what was given to me on to the person to the right. And so we're gonna talk about that. I'm gonna try to share, I don't know that I'll share too much about work that I've been a part of, but I will share that, for myself, I work in higher ed. I worked in higher ed for probably the past decade plus, and a lot of the work that I've been a part of has always been looking at how do you build effective bridges from our communities and with these institutions. So when institutions come and they say, oh, well, we want programming for the API folks, it's very important for me to say, disaggregate what you mean first, and then ask me again. And look at when we design things for our community, what do they look like? And do they resonate with who we are? And the only way for me to be able to do that is if I'm very familiar with who I am, right? And so this is something that I always come back to so that I'm properly giving space to the things that I've learned about the communities I'm from, and making sure that when I build programming within our community, that it's actually reflective, that it's actually responsive, that there's some sort of cultural responsiveness in it. And those things don't happen, the successes of those events and the successes of those programs don't just happen by happenstance, right? They happen because there's an understanding that the cultures that we come from, there's certain things that you have to have in order for it to be responsive with your community. And so that's why I wanted to platform this conversation, so we can explore what that has looked like for me, and what that may look like for you. So I start with saying, defining positionality. I really wish that I did not, let me not share a screen for a minute so I can get some audience interaction, because it's really lonely over here in this presentation space. Pause, share, what did I do? Stop share. Okay, so now we all look like the Brady Bunch right now, y'all. So who here, give me a thumbs up or a clap if you are familiar with the term positionality, because I don't want to assume anything of folks. So I hear positionality a lot, but that's because, I'm in the squad that I'm from. that don't mean, okay. All right. Okay, so now that I see all of y'all thumbs up, so can somebody share with us what positionality is? Remain engaged. Remain engaged, guys. Remember, it's a condition of the Falitali Malo. Does somebody want to unmute themselves and share with us what positionality is? And then saw all your thumbs go up, so it's not like you can say, I don't know. You already outed yourself. I know you know, or I'm gonna start popcorning people. You know what? Time has come for me to popcorn. La Susungo, La Faitele. Can you please share with us what positionality is?
Yeah, for me, it's what influences our lens, right? Our critical lens, and it's social and political context that like helps us the way we view our world, right? So like our what influences our identity.
Beautiful. Yes, exactly that. See, that wasn't so hard. Yeah, so that's positionality, right? So it defines our proximity to a topic that we might be talking about, and that's important because, as I shared earlier on, it's like that Falitali Malo. There's very many different entry points, and we shouldn't assume that one entry point is the only ever, right? So it's important for us to define positionality because that also shows us where power might lie or where it doesn't lie. So, for example, if I'm asking you, tell me what the United States is, and you're a wealthy white man, that might be different from me as, you know, if I'm a Native Hawaiian woman like Kui, you know, defining the United States, right? So positionality is very important anytime that we talk about any subject at all, because it gives us kind of the framework for how we enter into that conversation. So when we talk about, I guess I'll come back to my screen, positionality, share. When we talk about positionality, it's important for that reason. So I'm, you know, I can't just ask you that and then not explain mine. So my positionality in this conversation, when we talk about what is, you know, Pacific knowledge, what is it to, you know, stand, to talk, to walk as a Pacific person, my positionality is this. I was born here in the stolen kingdom of Hawaii, to the third child of Mary Meli Fuega. My father was in the military. So much of my upbringing was in the islands, but with some parts where we moved away. So spent a stint in Georgia, but for the most part, before I was 10, the majority of my life was spent in Hawaii and in Samoa. Since then, I've been here in Washington State, which is a very passive aggressive place that I'm not very used to, still 20 years later. I'm educated, went to the University of Washington, first in my family to go to college. Fortunately, not the last. So, you know, props, you know, to my siblings, whoop, whoop. I am a mother to an 8-year-old daughter, Hinevai woman Meto Fatu Moana Fuega. I'm also her father. Yo, credit me correctly if I do both jobs. I've been involved in community organizing for quite some time because community to me is so important for establishing ourselves here in the diaspora. So when I say positionality, when I say why these things are significant to me, for the reason of my family, for the reason of where I come from, the islands that I come from, and for the reason of my future, which is my daughter, this is how I position myself in proximity to this conversation. So now that I have done that for y'all, now it's your turn to define your own positionality. So fortunately, I'm not gonna popcorn you like I did, you know, sis, but I want you to think where you're at. What is your positionality? You're welcome to share that in the chat box if you choose to, but I just included a whole bunch of different types of questions that you might ask yourself, but you might have questions that aren't included in that box. That's just for, you know, to help kind of think things through. So when we think about the importance of standing strong in Pacific knowledge, what is your positionality to this conversation? I'm gonna give us a moment to think through that and say to ourselves. Nobody want to share the positionality? But I'm gonna start popcorning people then.
Hi. Okay. Don't porn, I'll share.
My name is Christina Johnson, and I live in Federal, Washington, and I grew up in Tacoma, Spano area, but me and my husband lived out here. And as it says, what are the most important parts of my identity? And for me is to understand and learn more of who I am, even though I was born here in America, to learn more of my culture and to be more part of the community, because sometimes I get uncomfortable being around my own people because I grew up in the military because my dad was in the military for 22 years. And so it was kind of hard because I wasn't around a lot of Samoans until I came here to Washington. So I don't speak Samoan. And that's one of the things that also turned me away because, you know, it's like you're not born in Samoa, so you're not good enough. You don't speak the language, you're not Samoan enough. So, you know, being in America, my identity as a Samoan woman always fluctuated from, oh, I know a lot about my ancestors, but I'm still not good enough. It doesn't make me any more Samoan.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing. It's good to see you here. I see you. We go way back. But thank you so much for sharing. Fang, I think you were saying that you were going to share too.
Oh, did I say that? Just
Too late
kidding.
now.
Okay, I'll go. I have to say that my positionality, or just my frame of reference, is strongly rooted in our culture and also my experience as a Samoan woman born in America and living in the diaspora. I can identify a little bit with what Christina said, just about not having as much knowledge as I would like to about our culture, except then I can say that I'm very fortunate to have lived in Samoa for my high school years. And so when you talk about Samoans being recognized for how they walk and stand and speak, I was lucky to have witnessed that firsthand. And so even though I was born here and I lived here for a majority of my life, Leone American Samoa, that is my home. So and I have had the chance to have two of my children go there and live there for a year on their own and get some experience to mine, and hopefully my other children will be able to live there at some point. But yeah, that's how I approach this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Fanga. Let me get one more person to share. Thank you, the women, for speaking. Some of our brothers, go ahead, press that unmute button and share with us your positionality. It doesn't have to be Kiana because he's my co-host, so you know, it has to be one of you guys other who didn't speak yet. Are we gonna sit here all awkward waiting for you guys?
Edwina shared inside of the chat. I don't know. Edwina, do you want to share out loud, or you want me to? Is it okay if I read it?
You can read it, bro. Thank you. And I was about to say, I was like, I am not a brother. You're gonna try and call me out.
I know, but you already typed it. So she says that she's a Samoan educator from the South End with the F, Seattle. I almost said something else, but I'll keep my comments to myself. My parents are from the villages of Savali, Upolu, and Tula Tutuila. I am a cisgendered woman, and I am preparing to go back to school this fall at Seattle U for student development administration. Proud first-generation student, group Christian and spiritual, and now working at Highline College as a leadership advisor.
Thank you, Iwizi, by way of Kiana. I appreciate that. So as we see, you know, in just these few snippets of, you know, positionalities that we talked about alone, you know, for Samoan women, each of us had our own unique experiences, right? And so that always has to be something that we consider anytime we enter into topics, because they're just, as you can see, like they shape the ways that we enter in, right? If language is there or if language is not there, it's going to shape our conceptions on, you know, Samoan language use. Or if you're raised strongly within the community, or on the island, or totally away from it, totally apart from it, disconnected, disjointed, that's going to shape our positionality with this conversation. So I wanted to bring that to the forefront because, again, it shapes our perspective. So let's get into the money. We're gonna learn some language, you know. I want to say I love using non-English language, not only because it relates back to our ancestry, but it really disrupts, right, kind of colonial conceptions we have on what is fact or what is valid. So it's not lost upon me that we have 39 people in here, probably majority of them are from Pacific Islands, and yet we're speaking the indigenous language of England, which is a country for me, never been to, probably never gonna go to either. But I speak their indigenous language, right? And that many of you may not have been to England as well, but you understand their language, we communicate, this is the structure that we communicate in lieu of using our own native languages. So in as many times as possible, I'm gonna use our language. Another positionality, I'm not super fluent in our language. That's not my fault. That's the fault of sophisticated systems of colonialism. But it is something that's always at the forefront of my thoughts whenever I'm thinking about sitting with language, being immersed in it, using it even when it makes me feel uncomfortable, challenging myself to engage. I do it myself, even when we're not in the Faletali Malo. So, you know, these are things, when I ask things of folks here, believe I'm gonna do this for myself too. So it's not just a one-way street. So when we say Iloa le Pasifika land too, so we're talking about a Pacific person is owned by how they stand, right? Or what they stand for, the values, the foundations that they stand upon. So I want you to think about, just take a moment to think what values build the foundation that you stand on. And if you would like, you can share that in the, hold up. Let me not get too ahead of myself. Nope, don't share it in chat box. Just kidding, because I'm gonna make you share with each other. So anyways, moving forward. Foundational values. So thinking about the values that we stand on, there's very many different things. You know, I could name a million different values that I stand on, but I wanted to look at what are the very basics, right? What are the main ingredients of carrying myself as a Pacific person in the context of the US, right? And how do we return back to Pacific knowledge bases and validate kind of the frame of mind that our ancestors thought in? So I want to bring, from that place, I want to bring out va. And I was going to ask what va means to people, but I actually put the definition there, so you're just going to read the screen. Okay, so va is the relational space shared between two entities. And I purposely put two entities instead of two beings because it is, you know, it can define space that's shared between two people, but it can also be the space that's shared between somebody in their village, or somebody in their church, or somebody and some valuable institution that they're a part of, right? So think for a moment. When you think about the word va and you translate that into English, there's not always a literal or even lateral translation for those things. So when we say what is va in English, please use the chat box if you know what va means in English. Space, connection, distance, space, come through, scholars. I actually can see the chat now. Learn things, new things every day. Yes, so space, right? So space is the English word that they give us as the equivalent, the lateral equivalent to our word when we say va, right? But they're still, at their core, there's still two different conceptions. So if you say space in English, right? There's a space between my hands. There's a space between my hands. When we look at this space, we look at it as something that creates a void, right? It's something that creates an emptiness between hand one and hand two. There's a space here. But when you say va in Samoan, what you mean is actually there's relationship, right? So the space that exists between one hand and the other hand is relationship. Relationship and space in English sometimes are juxtaposed. They do not mean the same thing. You do not say, you know, I need some space. When you tell, you know, Boo Bear, oh, I need some space. You don't say, I need some relation. No, you tell them, no, get the hell out of here. Don't come around here. I need some space from you. Like, go away. You say you need distance. You need disconnection. You need disjointedness. We need disconnect. But in the Samoan language, and even in other Pacific languages that use the conceptions of va, like Tongan, Fijian, Maori, va actually means to connect. So I wanted to make sure that we're recognizing the differences, right, between our own frame of thinking and the ones that we're forced into when we use the English language, which is why it's important for us to keep our own language alive. But so va can be described in very many different ways. In Samoan language, you'll hear like va fealua'i. And so va fealua'i, that can be the relationship, right? The space that you share between you and a loved one, you and your partner, or you and your parents, or you and your child, or you and the church, right? So it never says that we are individuals, but part of our individuality is defined by our relationship, right? So at the jump, the foundations of who we are as people already shift from the ways that we're taught individualism here in this country. So another cool thing, right? So when we have this va, this space, when you say in English, I need space, you know, I need time, I need space, that bread, we say disjointedness, but when Samoans, when we reference va, we say things like tausileva, you know, teuleva. That my, you know, I said we have 5 kids in my family, so my mom was always saying, "Hey, tausileva o bolo uso," and I was like, "No, mom, I don't want to do that. She get on my nerves." And what she's saying is that I need to take care of this space that exists between me and my siblings, right? That this space isn't just space for the sake of being space. In the Western context, space is space for the sake of being space. Ain't nothing else. Ain't nothing else to it. But in Pacific context, space is something that can be nurtured. Things can be imbued. You can take care of it. You can nurture it. You can enrich it. So when we think about va, when we think about ourselves, we have to shift ourselves away from thinking about ourselves as these single individuals, and really recognize kind of the philosophies that make up ourselves as Pacific people. So I wanted to highlight that. Also highlighting as foundational values in the Samoan countries, you know, America Samoa and independent Samoa, the foundations or the mottos of both of those countries, Samoa wha'waileatua, Samoa momoleatua. So Samoa is founded upon God and Samoa is led by God, right? God leads Samoa. So the relationship between us as Pacific people and our higher power, higher authority is very important. And that existed before the missionaries even came, okay? Creation stories, Tangaloa. If you go to Manu Atele, we will tell you our origin stories. We can kala the ngafa all the way back to Tangaloa, right? We can tell you how we're descendants from Tangaloa, where the first titles were placed and how we're descendants of those titles, right? So the relationship between us and the higher power has always ever been indigenous to us as a people. So Vatapuia describes that space that exists between us and the higher power. Ainga is another foundational value of ourselves, and they define how we stand. So I want to separate again, Pacific knowledge, Western knowledge. So when we say ainga, when we say family in the United States, a lot of times the thought that comes to mind is 2 parents, mother, father, 2.5 children. That's called the family of the American dream, you know, mother, father, 2.5 children. It's a very small definition of family. So when we say ainga within our context, we are not referencing the nuclear family. The nuclear family is a Western concept. The ainga, when we're talking about ainga in Samoa, we mean the extended family is included in that. And the relationships of the extended family are as significant as, you know, what the relationships that we keep here in the States with just, you know, me and my siblings. The extended family is all encompassing in the idea of family, right? So when you go to places like for at work, right? If I want to take bereavement leave, I can only take bereavement leave if my parent, somebody in my nuclear family passes away, or a grandparent. But if you think about us like as Samoans, as, you know, the ainga is all encompassing, we don't live in a society that gives us that same grace, right? Because family is defined differently than how we see family defined. This concept is super important for me. If you think for instance, when I say like that nuclear family is not native to us, I mean, like, even if you think about the word cousin, right? The word in Samoan for cousin is tausonga, which I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I might be wrong, but I think I'm 90% right. Kausonga is a adaptation of the word cousin. So anytime you hear the word adaptations of English words into our native language, that means that it's a foreign concept. So for instance, computer in Samoan is kompuka, which is adapted from the word computer, right? Lapiki is the word for rabbit. Rabiti, lapiki, right? These are adaptations of English words because they do not natively exist in our culture, in our islands. The same thing goes for kausonga, right? Cousins do not exist in Samoa. In Samoa, those are as much your siblings as your blood nuclear family siblings. And I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, but some of my brodies are in here, and I see them. The relationship that we have is as significant as the relationship that I have with my my siblings. So the relationship that I have with Epi and Fanga, who are sharing this space with us, are as significant as the relationships that I keep with, my brother and sister who we share the same parents as. So, did I change my own slide before I was supposed to? Sorry. Keep track. So extended family, it's important for us to remember the ways that we define family for ourselves, right? This is significant in my own family. And I mean, this is a story for my daughter to tell on her own, but I grapple with this conversation a lot when I talk to my daughter, right? So she'll say, well, what with Billy at school said, like, everybody has a dad and I don't have a dad. And I was like, girl, I'm your dad. I'm your dad, what you talking about? And I mean, I'm super comfortable with this conversation, so I'm not like trying to disclose my whole life to you. No, I mean, when I think about our family structure, I think about us in the family, Samoan Ainga. Yes, we have the nuclear families. Yes, they make us up. But yes, there are also, other families who are raised by their aunties and their uncles. This was very common practice, right? For our parents to send, for our parents to be sent away and be raised by their aunts and uncles. This was very true for both of my parents, that, for a portion of their life, they're raised by their parents, and then they were sent away for years and years and years to be raised with their aunts and uncles. Because we share parentship relationship. And so explaining this to, a kid who lives in a society that only reinforces the nuclear family as the only ever structure for family is a little bit difficult. But I remind her, you have your grandparents, grandma, papa, auntie, uncle. We're all your parents, so tell Billy, you don't have, you got like 12 parents, so you ain't got to worry about it. If I have Billy, I don't know who's knocking on my door right now, but if I have Billy, malolo. Hold on. Go away. Sorry, I got somebody knocking on my door and it's only me and he at home. And he is not finna answer it. Scary Berry. Let me pause this really quickly. You guys go ahead and chat in the chat box. Let me just go make sure this person's not trying to steal anything from let me go leave it from my door. All right, they're gone. So a little bit scary. So ainga nu'u. So when we talk about being a part of the diaspora, the nu'u is an interesting concept, right? Because we no longer organize ourselves in the village. But I would venture to say that villages as a concept still travel with us, right? So whereas we might not have Olosengan, Leone, whichever beautiful villages that you're from, it's not uncommon to see our communities rally together and stay together, because what I think is that the concepts that they have of villages follow us, right? So it might not be Leone, but it might be, Ifaka Safor Louis, or whatever church that you grew up in, or whatever community base that you serve, right? These are the new conceptions on the village. So even when we leave the islands, these main things, these things go with us. in the interest of time, I'm looking at time. I need to keep moving forward because your girl be talking too much. But one last thing I'll say about, one last thing that I'm gonna say about Nu'u is that there's this cool thing we do, right? When you think about Nu'u village, here's some words, anga Nu'u. So when you think about anga Nu'u is the lateral word for anga Nu'u is culture. But if you break that down, it means the spirit of the village. Anga meaning spirit, Nu'u meaning village, spirit of the village. Atu Nu'u. So Atu Nu'u, lateral translation is country. It's just a corner of the village the corner village that we live in. It's a specific island that we're from, right? When we think about Loto Nu'u, and we're gonna come back to this word, Loto Nu'u is often, in the ways that I've experienced conversations around Loto Nu'u, is like the identity of a village or the spirit of a village, right? And so I'm gonna draw more upon this because these are things that they don't necessarily translate into English. And this is why I say it's so important for us to understand the frameworks that we come from, because there are things that are gonna be absent in the worlds that we live in the languages that we live in, but they don't have any less impact on what we can kind of imagine for the future when we use this savali to move forward. Okay, so I did a whole lot of talking. It's been so quiet over here except for me and person that was knocking on the door. So Junga or Ness, actually, Ness is gonna break you all into rooms so that you guys can talk to each other, stop talking to the chat box and stuff. And I want you guys to answer the question, what values build the foundation that you stand on? So I'll give us a few minutes, maybe like 5 or 6 minutes, but in your breakout discussions, very simple, what values build the foundation that you stand on? And remember, you might not know each other, but challenge yourself to engage. All right, Ness, go ahead, do your thing. Is everybody back now? Okay, I gotta get our share screen back up and going. Hold up. What is? Because I still wanna make sure that I leave time afterward for us to ask questions. Okay, I'm gonna do this one more. There's one last thing, y'all. I know, you're like, dang, this girl talk a lot. There's nobody in the house but me, y'all. I need friends, okay? Because I know I'm getting on my daughter's nerves. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Wait, before I go share my screen, let me hear some feedback from y'all. So if you would challenge me to engage, challenge yourself to engage, can someone from one of the groups share maybe some of the values that were expressed in their group?
Hello.
Go ahead, Jalissa.
Hi, everyone. For my group, all three of us mentioned family, but we also mentioned about God and independence of our own self, even if we're in a collective kind of culture. There's like places where you have to be independent to be like not only for yourself but also to like help your family too. Because like there's situations where you have to do it like on your own, and you can't always rely on family. And like by doing that, it would also help your family as well. So
Hey, thank you for sharing.
thank you.
Let's get somebody else to share. What did you guys talk about in your rooms? I'm nosy. I want to know.
Lydia Faitalia said something really good.
Now, Susungara Faitele, go ahead and share with us. I love it. This is great.
I just love it. Huh? I was just sharing how, like, I know for me, being born here in the States, right? And sometimes it could be confusing for me personally. It was a tad bit confusing about my role. But something that they always said was that my elders tell me when I go home to village council is, if you understand Fanua, right? Right? Which means like if you understand land, you'll understand basically your positionality, right? So there is no Samoan word for positionality, but I'm trying to get that, right? And so with that, it helped me kind of unpack, right? And so with you sis mentioning positionality, identity is fluid. So as we're never the same person, and that's something I wanted to highlight for all of us brothers and sisters that are on this call, is we're always learning and we're always changing. So that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's get one more person to share. Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for that food. Thank you for bringing that into our Fale Talimalo. Let me get one more person to share without keeping us in awkward silence.
I can share. Oh.
Yes, you, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. In my group, I was just, oh gosh, sorry. I was just sharing about like my background. I'm Samoan, born and raised in Hawaii, and I've been in Seattle for 13, 14 years. And I think one of the values that unfortunately we were kind of raised on is just the idea that like we should only think about like moving forward, how we're, oh hey Alina. And wasn't really taught about like our, you know, culture and like where we came from. And so I'm playing a lot of catch up and like doing so much homework on my own end. I don't speak this Samoan language. And also like all of my grandparents are dead. I only had one living grandparent growing up, and the last 10 years of her life, you know, she had dementia, and so I unfortunately didn't get her full self to hear those stories and get that background. So trying to learn from my little one over here, but thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So that dependency we have, right, on the generations that are before us, they're really important, right? So when we talk about our knowledge bases, there's a beautiful saying in Hawaiian that I love using, which means that not all knowledge is gained in just one school. And I want to always platform that, you know, we can learn as much as we're going to learn in these, you know, systems of education, you know, institutions of education, college, you know, K through 12, but never neglect the institutions of education that exist within the vibe between ourselves and our parents, or ourselves and our siblings. So that was really important, because there's so much leniency we have, right, to get, you know, the people who come before us, or the last generations who were on the land, to teach us about the land, especially for us who exist in the diaspora. So thank you so much for sharing that, Sala. That's so important for us to rely on that. And I want to challenge those of us too who see our brothers and sisters who don't have those connections for whichever reasons, right? You know, sometimes their parents passed away, or they weren't raised amongst us. Yo, come and nurture them, okay? So that's gonna lead us right into the next part. Look at me drawing all these things. It's like I'm a professional weaver, okay? Y'all won't be navigators, but I'm gonna be a weaver, okay? I'm gonna lalong a fala. Oh, hey, weaving house, come through, Ruby. When I figure out how to share my screen again. Share, boom. No? Okay, try again. No. Good. Yeah, knowledge. So thank you for indulging us in that. I realized we got only 15 minutes left already. Oh my God. So I want to talk about just one last thing. We started from the top. Iloa le Pasifika, Iloa le Samoa, le savali, le tautala. We talked about the foundations that we stand on, right? Shared with the foundations that we stand on. We're gonna talk about speaking. So when this adage was created, a lot of people will reference it and say, you know, like you should know Samoan language. There's a misunderstanding that the sophisticated systems of colonization take things from us without us giving consent to have things taken from us. So when we say to someone, young people who don't speak Samoan, you should know how to speak Samoan. And you know, there's no little kid that said, oh, I'm gonna pick in my brain, you know, I'm a 1-year-old, I'm gonna pick this language, not that language. No, we're taught language, okay? So we're somebody tells us what language to speak in. And so a lot of times that's conditioned by the environments that we're raised in. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that when we think about the survival of language, we acknowledge the systems and the challenges that exist within the systems that erase our attachment to those languages. So I'm not going to approach this Iloa le Samoa and tautala from the perspectives of saying, you know, the Samoan because how they speak in Samoan. It unfortunately is not a feasible reality for us any longer. So we need to progress that conversation to look at what is the ways in which what are the things that we're speaking about? What are the things that are imbued in our speech? While at the same time, never neglecting the importance of language. So let me touch on language really quickly, and then I'm gonna come back to speech. Here's the reasons why language is important. I've talked about this throughout our presentation. Make you smaller. The use of all native language is an imperative for its survival. So again, very many different entry points when it comes to language, but no matter where you're at, why I want to show it's important is because if you don't use the language, you lose it. So when I say use the language, I don't mean you don't have to go and rattle off a launa. You don't have to go and, you know, deliver some huge speech to a whole bunch of, you know, first language Samoan speakers. But I am going to ask us when you move forward out of this talk, whether your native language is Samoan or wherever the islands or the native lands that you're from, I'm going to ask you to explore what are those native languages there, and push yourself to use those in everyday use, right? So in a lot of the programming that I'm a part of, I will purposefully name them because I know I work for the colleges, so I'll purposefully name them using our language. So we have a STEM program. We use the term vaka, and I use that term because, you know, I want to give homage to how navigation plays its role as a Pacific form of scientific exploration, but I also want to disrupt the use of colonial language in an institution, in, you know, college institutions, to show that it's not just English speaking terms that have scientific contributions. When we say vaka and we look at the way that va'as travel from one island to other islands and explore the globe over, right? It takes science to be able to do it. It takes a system of observations over long periods of time in order for you to know how to navigate, in order for you to know what winds, what patterns, how the water is, what whanua is out there to locate where you're at. So there's a lot of knowledge systems that are imbued within our language. And also, I really like when people get mad that I use non-English language. So Vaka, we had somebody, you know, every time they see it, they would mispronounce it and say, why are you using that? What? This is Vaka. This is Vaka. And I was like, no, girl, this is Vaka. And I'm not going to entertain you, you know, mispronouncing. That's not a place where you want to learn anything from me. What you're trying to do is enforce that only things in English should be in this institution. And we just don't play that over here in these streets, okay? So I implore for us, whenever you have the ability to use our language to describe the things that are for our community. One, because it resonates with our community. Two, because it disrupts. It disrupts this idea that English is the only valid language when we have things that are for not just islanders, but even, you know, more than islanders. So when we say we have responsibility to community, I implore us to use words like kuleana or tautua. When we say, you know, hey, you need to go and, you know, deal with your friend over there that you have an issue with, I implore us to use terms like, you know, tauliva, tausiliva, or whatever that sounds like in your language. So using those frameworks, because if you don't lose it, then you lose it. Don't use it, you lose it. And as I've talked about before, there's not always a lateral translation. Literal and lateral, those are two important things. There's not always a equivalent to what we say in our language in English. So, and we should not assume the hyper sophistication of the English language to capture the knowledge that we come from. So some words that come to mind, right? When I think about mana, and so the lateral translation to the word mana, they'll say, it means power, it means life force. There is no English word for mana that I felt, you know, being around my grandparents, you know, or hearing stories that are generations and generations and generations and generations old, or seeing my first real kuinga, or seeing the fine weaving patterns of a ietsele. There's no English equivalent for those words. You might say powerful, but it still falls to the wayside of what mana actually encompasses. Mana encompasses everything from life force to gravitas to bravado and all of these grandiose things that the English language just does not capture, right? In our cultures, mana is protected through tapu, and these are things that conceptually in the Western world are foreign. So so give us credit where credit is due. Understand that there's not always lateral translations. Lotso Nu'u, I talked about this earlier. I wanted to highlight this because Lotso Nu'u as a descriptor, right, of a village's identity. In the islands that we come from, in Samoa, every family is tied to a village, right? So there's a practice, you know, when somebody comes, they want to greet your village. They come with a traveling group. They want to greet your village. They might recite a fa'alupenga, which is the breakdown of all of the high chiefs, all of the chiefs, all of the titles of your village to show that, hey, I'm informed, I know who the families are that are from Leone, and I want to show my ability to relay that to you. So the significance there is that it shows the unique relationship Samoan families have with the villages that they're from, right? So when you try to translate that into a place like the US, where we're on stolen lands, the conceptions around village pride for First Nations people who belong to those villages do not translate across to people who now occupy, you know, the city of Stellicum that I stay in. Because in Stellicum, it's named after Native people, but ain't no Native people here because they all got, you know, pushed off of their land. So this is what I mean when we have things that are owned in our language, there's not always a lateral equivalent to it in English. And so I want to give, you know, just credence to the language piece because of that. And we talked about Aima as well. That's my soapbox for that. But let's go into, you know, maybe like some of the proverbial sayings that we have, right? So we've been using tautala, savali this whole time. This is another one that we usually talk about when we use when we reference our kids, right? So the offspring of birds are nurtured with flowers, but the children of people are nurtured through word and speech. So when we talk about tautala, when we talk about speaking, it's not enough for us to only relegate this to how we nurture kids, right? We have to nurture ourselves and our va with the way that we speak to each other. So that's a part that gives, you know, the Pacific very, very unique, I would say unique relationships, right? The people that I'm privileged to, who will sometimes call me their mentor, it's such an important thing for me, right, to visualize for them because sometimes I know that they will not visualize certain things for themselves. So I will say things to them and they're like, Kiana, you're out of your mind. I'm like, oh, I'm not. I'm very much inside of my mind, you know, every day inside my mind. But I have to speak things about their future to them, not only because that's my role as a mentor, but these are things that are part of our culture, right? That if we nurture the va that we have between each other, they need to be nurtured through language. And so when we don't have the Samoan language to use, it's okay, I have empowerment that I can use. But the framework for why I encourage them, right, is because that's the way that we tell va. That's the way that we take care of space between us. And that's the way that we nurture in the ways that we were taught to nurture. And then one more, and then I know we're drawing close on time. So one more thing as it relates to words, just proverbial sayings. So stones decay, but words remain. So bringing attention back, right, to how significant the spoken word is for Pacific people who do not relegate all of their knowledge systems to only the written word. You know, in English, if it's not written, it doesn't exist. If it's not measurable, it doesn't exist. Those are not frameworks that belong to us. Right? So I want us to make sure that we memorize that words carry weight, because words until we had the written word that didn't come to us until like a little bit over 100 years ago. Until then, everything was oral traditions. Everything was based on the oral traditions. And so within our words, our knowledge systems, our communication systems, are the things that our grandparents come from, our parents come from. So in as much as we can, please make sure that you're taking care of language. And you know, if you don't have the language for yourself, make sure that you're connecting with people who can share this space with you. I'm always down for that. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now. because I have one more activity, but that'll just take too much time, y'all. It's gonna take too much time because your girl talk a lot. So I want to leave the last few minutes, like 7 minutes left. I mean, I'm proud of y'all. Can everybody give each other a clap emoji? Because it's been a long, 90 minutes or so, almost 90 minutes. Clap for each other. There we go. This claps for all of y'all. I want to leave this space open for us to drop back in, for folks to share. This is a village. We're all in the same Faratali model together. So are there any comments or questions that we have? I want to open up the floor for that. And I also want to challenge you to engage. Sound on mine.
For me, I guess something that comes across is I love this presentation for many reasons, because it's okay to be indigenous in these Western spaces, right? And so your existence is your resistance. So I just wanted to say thank you so for really shedding light on this topic and allowing all of our communities to chime in. So thank you.
Thank you, sis. Other people, any reflections? Man, y'all chat was on and popping. I can see like the number thing. I'm like, dang, there's little comments. But I'm like, cause you got hella talking. So please share.
I had a comment. I just wanna, one, thank you for this presentation, and then two, also be mindful of how tough it must have been for our parents or our grandparents or whoever it was in your family that came to mainland, came to the US to try to build a better future for us. And although we're trying to like decipher like this being American and being Samoan, but then also how that might have felt for our parents back in those days. So us here in 2020, what was that like in 1970 or 1960? And so I just wanted to take some time to like reflect on the sacrifices that our parents made for us.
For sure, for sure. Most definitely, really important for us to always remember. Thank you so much. Yeah, my parents lived through a different time, right? Each of our parents did. Different challenges, different ways that they were received in the, wherever they were at. So totally, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I just got on not too long ago, but I appreciate this space. Thank you, Kiana, for doing this Zoom. But so that's one thing that I think about all the time too. Is I think about time, space, and I think about times changing and how do we get our people to adapt to the change, but still honor traditions and keeping sacred things that should be sacred alive. But still understanding that times are changing, and as generations are coming and different generations are coming in, and even those are changing. How do we get our old people to also accept that, but still honor what our ancestors had paved for us to continue to do or continue to keep alive within our own lives. So yeah, that's just something that I think about too. So.
Hi, PJ. Thank you for coming. Yeah, that's such an important question. I mean, I feel like I've taken up so much space. So I want to open the floor for folks who have reflections on this, on, how do we keep these things alive? Right? How do we leave for the next generation? While also recognizing that we're in different times than our parents were, as was shared earlier. Do we have some reflections on that?
I can share something. For coming from Hawaii and back during the 20th century when being Hawaiian wasn't a good thing at all. In fact, it was we were told, I hear from my uncles and some of my grandparents being Hawaiian was really bad. So Hawaiians worked really hard to be American at one point. But now that I'm able to go to school and learn in Hawaiian studies, or there's Hawaiian events offered in the community that people can like learn from. And I can share it with my family, and it's like, it's really cool because they're like, wow, I never got to learn that because they told me it was really bad to be Hawaiian. So it's really cool to like share that opportunity with my family.
Yeah, it's called like cultural resurgence, right? So making sure that, you know, ourselves as people who are moving into different positions in society, that we are mindful of what ways we can have cultural resurgence in the things that we do. So for instance, PJ, when I think about us here in Washington, I think about growing up here in Washington, a lot of the things I've had the privilege to be a part of, we did not have, you know, so there's multiple opportunities for students to come to the college campuses, to be a part of programming that specifically, you know, calls them out as Pacific Islanders to invite them to, but those were built by our people, right? And so I think it's built by those people, including today's, you know, this month-long session was built by our folks, because we recognize the importance of having explicit conversations that are for us and by us, right? While recognizing the current times that we live in. So for, you know, my parents' generation, if they got to college, they got to college, you know, great. But there wasn't a lot of effort that way. Now that we have opportunity to do that, and we have folks who know how to design specifically for those communities, they rally together and create those types of spaces for us. So we'll have, you know, sometimes our folks will come in and say, you know, it's a little bit different. And it is gonna be different, right? And we have to give culture that space to be the dynamic thing that it's gonna be. It's fluid, it's dynamic, it's not static. There are foundational values can be static, right? But the ways that we employ them are going to look different, right? They're going to look very different than what it looked like in the generations before. But I think anytime that I've seen our elders come to things that are run by our younger folks, they're always happy because they can feel it is still the same. It's different, but they can feel the spirit of it. The foundational values that we talked about today, those are still at the foundation of that work. So I think that that's one big word too.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate spaces like this. I mean, shout out to our educators out there too, right? I mean, you know, like for them to be able to take, like, you know, some of our things from our ancestors and try to mend them with what, you know, what is happening today, so that our kids of today are understanding, like, you know, things that, you know, that they should be understanding from, that our people bring, that, you know, are being lost here in the States. And so, yeah, just shout out to our educators. You guys rock.
Ooh, and when I say educators, you know, remember what we said, you know, not all education is learned in just one space. So, you know, shout out to all the educators in every form, every sort of corner that we come from, right?
Right.
So I want to be mindful of time as well, that it's a minute after 1:30, you know. One more thing about language, time me, right? Time me sounds like the word time, because time is a foreign concept to, you know, the Pacific, okay? We don't measure we don't measure time in such a way. But I want to be mindful of people's time, you know, just because I want you to stay here don't mean that you get to stay here. So there's one tradition that we do, and I'm going to ask everybody to indulge us if you have the ability to take yourself off of, stop, you know, to operate your camera. I don't know how you say it, Kiana. We want to take a picture. We want to take a group photo.
Or your video.
Nestor's gonna do it, right? One of y'all gonna do it?
Yep. Yes.
Thank you. I love my moderators. They're the best. So, you know, I'm not gonna force anybody to be a part of this photo, but if you would like to join us, go ahead and unmute that video. You know, show us your beautiful faces. Oh my gosh, look at this, so great. Hey. Okay, y'all. So, you know, you ain't gotta go home. That was like kind of the end of the talk, but I mean, you know, this space is still open. So if you have questions, I welcome you to stay, ask questions, stay in the community. If not, you know, we have a email form that was in the chat that Kyunga is going to repost again. And if you could fill out that eval form, that really gives me great feedback so I can know things to do better.
Wait, who took the picture? Did you get my good side? I'm done.
Every side is a good side.
I can't stand you, Peter.
we got 4 different photos, so you know, every side is a good side, PJ. We got you. But thank you everybody for coming. Y'all so bomb.
Bye. Thank you, Kiana, for the space.
Yes,
We also
thank you,
have an
Kiana.
event coming up at 3 o'clock today, Pacific Standard Time, with Teresa Siangotonu. So if you go to Bitly, our Bitly page, it has more information.
Oh.
So I'm going to share that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Thank you for Trio at Highline College for sponsoring that. So yes, please join Teresa at 3 o'clock. Hey, listen, me and Teresa are cousins, okay? Just so you understand, me and my family, we ran this stuff today. Just me not having enough sleep. But dang, how is everybody? Who's up on here? Everybody's on here. What's up, y'all? Like I said, it's only me in the house. Keena's still sleeping. Keena don't care about my life.
Thank you for teaching us so much Samoan today.
Yeah, that was pretty dope.
Thanks, sis. I know I'm coming out of the blues, Tila.
I know, I see you there.
But yeah, that was great. You know I always love to hear you talk, so thank you.
Dang.
Yeah, thank you, Kiana, for laying some pearls of wisdom down. You're fire.